Hey everyone, welcome to a deep dive all about EQ. Emotional intelligence, it's one of those things that just feels so relevant no matter what's going on in the world or even just in your own life.
Right, absolutely.
And we've got like a really interesting mix of sources for this one. We've got some TEDx talks, we've got some YouTube videos that are really practical, and even a little Oprah's Super Soul Sunday where she talks to like the EQ expert Daniel Goleman. So,
Oh, wow.
yeah, we're going to unpack all of that and see what we can learn.
It's funny how emotional intelligence is often misunderstood. People think it's just about being like touchy-feely or overly sensitive.
Right. It's not just about being emotional. It's like in Ramona Hacker's TEDx talk
Yeah.
when she's like, do you consider yourself emotionally intelligent? I was like, whoa. I've never even thought about that. Like most of us, I think, have never really been taught what EQ even is, let alone like how much of it we have.
Yeah. Right. And she does such a good job of making that distinction. It's not about being super emotional. It's about understanding those emotions, managing those emotions, and then actually using them effectively. And that's where Daniel Goleman's work has been so influential. He really brought EQ into the mainstream and showed that it's not this fixed trait, it's actually a set of skills that we can develop.
Okay, so that's good news. That means we're not stuck with whatever we were born with. We can actually like work on it and get better. Well, and speaking of working on it, we found this really cool advice from Jefferson Fisher on YouTube about how to boost your EQ in everyday conversations. He's got this 3-step method. It sounds so simple, but really powerful.
Oh, I'm intrigued.
Okay, so the first one is about setting boundaries.
Yeah.
Especially when things get heated. So instead of like blaming the other person, he says, try using the phrase I need, like I need a minute to think about this, or I need to take a break from this conversation.
That's such a good way to de-escalate a situation and shift the focus to your own emotional state. I can see that being helpful for anyone who tends to, get swept up in the heat of the moment.
Totally, yeah. And then step 2 is all about shifting your mindset from proving your point to actually learning something. So it's about approaching the conversation with curiosity, asking questions, and trying to see things from the other person's perspective.
I think that really gets to the heart of what emotional intelligence is all about. It's that ability to step outside of your own ego and be truly open to understanding another person's experience, which is not easy, but it's so crucial for building strong relationships.
Yeah, absolutely. And then his third step is my favorite. What triggers you teaches you.
Ooh.
So he says to look at those moments when someone like pushes your buttons, not as annoyances, but as opportunities for self-reflection. Like ask yourself, what is it about this situation that's affecting me so strongly?
That's where Goleman's emphasis on self-awareness comes in. It's the foundation of emotional intelligence. If we can understand our triggers, we can start to manage our reactions better. It's like shining a light on those unconscious patterns that are driving our behavior.
So let me ask you this. What are some of your triggers? And what have you learned from them? I think it's so valuable to just take a moment and really reflect on that.
Well, that's a great question. One of my triggers is when people interrupt me. It used to really get under my skin, but I've come to realize that it often stems from, my own insecurity about not being heard. So now when it happens, I try to take a breath and try to understand, like, where's that other person coming from?
Yeah, that's a great example of turning a trigger into an opportunity for growth. And it makes me think about Goleman's 4-domain model of emotional intelligence. He breaks it down into self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, and relationship management. It's like a roadmap for developing those EQ muscles.
It is. It's great to have a framework like that, especially when you're talking about something as complex as emotional intelligence.
Okay, so let's dive into those domains a bit. We've already touched on self-awareness, but I'm curious about self-management. What are some of the key skills involved there?
Well, self-management is all about handling your emotions effectively, so you're not hijacked by them, right? Think about it like having a toolbox full of strategies. For regulating your emotions, it's not about suppressing feelings, but rather finding healthy ways to express and channel them.
Okay, that makes sense. So what kind of tools are we talking about? Give me an example.
Sure. Let's say you're feeling super overwhelmed by stress. A self-management tool might be taking a few minutes to practice deep breathing, or going for a walk to clear your head. Or if you're feeling angry, maybe you journal about it, or talk to a trusted friend instead of lashing out. It's about finding what works for you.
I love that. And that reminds me of something Mark Brackett talked about in his Yale talk. He was all about developing a richer emotional vocabulary. So he's like, instead of just saying, I'm angry, Get curious about the nuances of that anger. Like, what kind of angry am I feeling? Is it frustrated anger? Is it righteous anger? Is it helpless anger?
Right, exactly. The more specific we can be about our emotions, the better equipped we are to manage them. And his research is fascinating. He did this study where teachers' moods actually influenced how they graded student essays, and they weren't even aware they were doing it.
Whoa, that's so wild. It really shows you how much our emotions can influence our perceptions and decisions, often without us even realizing it. I have definitely noticed that in my own life. Like, if I'm feeling stressed, I'm way more likely to interpret like a neutral comment as criticism.
Absolutely. And that's why self-awareness is so important. The more aware we are of our emotional state, the less likely we are to let it unconsciously bias our thoughts and actions.
Okay, so we talked about self-awareness and self-management. What about social awareness? How does that fit into the EQ puzzle?
Social awareness is all about empathy. It's the ability to understand and share the feelings of others. It's like stepping outside of your own bubble and seeing the world through someone else's eyes.
It sounds like a superpower, honestly.
Yeah.
Especially in today's world where it feels like everyone's kind of stuck in their own echo chambers.
I know, it's a skill that takes practice, though. It involves active listening, paying attention to nonverbal cues, and asking questions to really understand where someone else is coming from.
So it's not just about hearing what someone is saying,
Yeah,
but also like tuning into the emotions behind their words and their actions.
exactly. And when we can do that, it opens up a whole new level of connection and understanding.
Which brings us to the final domain, relationship management. So how do we take all of this EQ knowledge and actually use it to build better relationships?
Well, relationship management is the culmination of all the other domains. It's about using our self-awareness, our self-management, and our social awareness to create healthy, positive connections with others.
So it's like taking all those EQ skills and putting them into action in our interactions with other people.
Exactly. It involves things like effective communication, conflict resolution, knowing how to inspire and influence others in a way that's authentic and respectful.
It sounds like the ultimate recipe for a happy and fulfilling life. I mean, strong relationships are at the heart of so much of what makes life meaningful.
They are, absolutely. And when we have strong EQ muscles, we're better equipped to build and maintain those kinds of relationships.
You know, as we've been talking about all this, I keep thinking about D. Ivan Young's TEDx talk, where he talks about the stories we tell ourselves. He makes this point that our thoughts and feelings actually shape our reality. If we're constantly telling ourselves these negative stories, it can become a self-fulfilling prophecy.
Oh, that's so true. That reminds me of what Oprah and Goldman were talking about, the power of our internal narratives. Goldman said that those stories can either limit us or empower us. It's a choice.
Right. So if we want to build better relationships, create a more fulfilling life, even make a positive impact on the world, it starts with becoming aware of those stories we're telling ourselves, and then consciously choosing to rewrite them with more empowering narratives.
And that's where emotional intelligence comes in. It gives us the tools to understand our emotions, manage our reactions, and cultivate those positive connections with ourselves and others.
This has been so insightful, but before we wrap up, I want to touch on something that really resonated with me from Ramona Hacker's TEDx talk. She shared how growing up, she didn't receive the emotional support that she needed from her parents. They didn't really teach her the value of emotions.
You know, sadly, I think that's a pretty common experience for a lot of people. We live in a culture that often dismisses or minimizes the importance of emotions, especially for boys and men.
It's true. And she makes this really compelling point about how that lack of emotional literacy can have some pretty serious consequences. You know, it can lead to insecurity, difficulty connecting with others, and even contribute to things like bullying and prejudice.
Absolutely. If we don't understand our own emotions, it's much harder to understand and empathize with the emotions of others, especially those who are different from us.
And I think that's such a crucial point, especially in today's world, where there's so much division and polarization. You know, if we want to create a more compassionate and understanding society, it starts with cultivating emotional intelligence in ourselves and in the next generation.
I agree. We need to start prioritizing emotional intelligence as a society, both for our own well-being and for the well-being of future generations.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground today,
Yeah.
but I feel like we've only scratched the surface of this huge topic. What are your final thoughts?
My final thought is this. Emotional intelligence is not a luxury. It's a necessity. It's the key to navigating the complexities of life, building strong relationships, and creating a more just and compassionate world.
Beautifully said. And with that, let's move on to the final part of our deep dive, where we'll explore some practical takeaways and leave you with some food for thought.
So, as we're exploring all these different facets of EQ, I keep coming back to this idea of balance. Like, it's not just about, mastering those difficult emotions. It's also about nurturing those positive ones.
Right, and that makes me think of what Tan Koa was saying in her video about not romanticizing sadness. I think so many of us can fall into that trap, especially when we're feeling down.
Oh, totally. Like, sometimes I catch myself listening to sad music.
Yeah.
Or rewatching, like, a tearjerker movie. It's like I'm almost trying to wallow in it.
It is tempting, right?
Right.
But her point is that while it's important to acknowledge and process that sadness, getting stuck there can actually prevent us from experiencing joy. So she encourages us to be more proactive about it, to actively seek out experiences that uplift us.
Yeah, I love that. It's like this reminder that we're not at the mercy of our emotions. We can choose to cultivate joy even when things are tough. Exactly, and that choice is so empowering. It's about recognizing that we have agency over our emotional landscape.
And you know what? That idea of choosing joy really ties back to Goleman's point about the stories we tell ourselves. If we're constantly feeding ourselves these negative narratives, it's going to impact how we feel and how we show up in the world.
Absolutely. Those stories have such a profound impact on our reality. But the good news is that we have the power to rewrite them. Emotional intelligence gives us the tools to challenge those limiting beliefs and replace them with more empowering ones.
It's like we're the authors of our own emotional stories.
Yeah.
And we get to decide what kind of story we want to tell.
Exactly. That's a pretty amazing realization.
It is. I think that's a key takeaway from this whole deep dive. Emotional intelligence isn't just about managing difficult emotions.
Yeah.
It's also about nurturing positive emotions and using them to fuel our growth, our relationships, even our impact on the world.
Yeah, it's about recognizing that we have this power to shape our own emotional reality and to create that ripple effect of positivity in the world around us.
Well, I think we've reached the end of our deep dive into emotional intelligence. We've covered so much ground today, from understanding the basics to exploring some really nuanced and thought-provoking ideas.
It's been such a fascinating conversation. And hopefully, it sparked something in you to keep exploring EQ in your own life.
So as we wrap up, we want to leave you with a final question to think about. What resonated with you most from this conversation? And what's one small step you can take this week to cultivate a little more emotional intelligence in your own life?
Remember, even those small steps can make a big difference. So keep learning, keep practicing, and keep exploring this amazing world of EQ.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time.